There was a time when millions of Americans walked into Lowe's with hope, hoping to upgrade the kitchen, hoping to renovate the bathroom, hoping to refresh life with a few weekend projects. But today, Lowe's numbers are telling a very different story. No longer booming, no longer enthusiastic. There's only a slowdown left, painful and prolonged. Consumers are constantly spending money, but they are spending less, more slowly, and are more afraid of making mistakes. Large projects have been postponed indefinitely. Long-term investments are being replaced by short-term solutions, temporary patches, quick fixes, and cheap purchases. Lowe's seems to be seeing what many of us are feeling: a tired home improvement market where every bill is the result of hours of deliberation. And this isn't just about a retail corporation. This is a mirror reflecting the economic mood of the entire American middle class. In this video, we'll break down Lowe's numbers, not like a Wall Street analyst, but like someone who's had to ask themselves, is it time to renovate now, or should I wait? If you've ever procrastinated on a project because you didn't feel ready, stay, because you're not alone. If you just quickly skim through Lowe's financial statements, the initial impression is very positive. There was no crash, no sensationalist headlines. There are no glaring red flags. Revenue remains in the tens of billions of dollars. Net profit is still calculated in billions of USD. Comparable sales even saw a slight increase, plus 0.2%, plus 0.4%, and online sales increased by double digits, over 11%. On paper, this is the image of a company that is slow but steady. But in the financial world, there's an unspoken rule. The most dangerous numbers are often the ones that look okay. Imagine you're driving a huge truck on the highway. Its maximum speed used to be 100 kilometers per hour. Now the speedometer needle is only moving another 0.2 kilometers per hour. The car hasn't stopped yet, but it's losing traction. For a retail giant like Lowe's, 0.2% isn't growth. It's treading water against the wind. Inflation is still there. Labor costs are still high. Shipping prices haven't returned to their previous levels yet. In that context, such a small step is like standing still but not falling. And then came the next number. Online sales increased by over 11%. That sounds very impressive. But let's pause for a moment. The online increase doesn't mean Americans are excited to renovate their homes again. It just says something very mundane. They go out less and shop more carefully. Instead of wandering around the store, they ordered quickly, efficiently, and just enough, then closed their laptops. In other words, the sales channel is changing, not consumer spending sentiment booming. If everything is truly fine, this would be the time for management to open the champagne. But what we see is a very different tone, cautious, guarded, and constantly emphasizing that consumers are still under pressure. It's a small detail, but in financial reporting, the voice is just as important as the numbers. When a giant company has to celebrate a 0.2% increase, that's not a victory. It's a sigh of relief that they haven't been swept away. So the question is, if the exterior of the store is still brightly lit, the shelves are still full, and the website is still running smoothly, where is the real fatigue coming from? Maybe it's not included in the revenue. Maybe it's not in the profits. And it's among the decisions Americans are delaying every day. And to understand that, we need to look deeper, not at Lowe's, but at the shopper standing in front of the shelves. In the next part, we will peel back the layers of data to see clearly who is tired, what they are tired of, and why this is slowing down the entire market. If numbers don't lie, then the more important question is, what are they not telling us? In Lowe's reports, one detail is repeated over and over in a very soft tone. DIY remains weak, while Pro maintains its pace. Hearing that, it just sounds like a customer classification. But if you put it on the operating table, this is where the fatigue of the entire market begins to show. Imagine two groups of people entering the store. One person is a regular homeowner who does renovations on weekends. The other person is a professional craftsman who is forced to buy materials to complete the contract. When DIY slows down, it's not just about selling less paint or fewer tiles. That's a sign of something deeper. Consumer confidence is shrinking. Of course, Americans still see the old kitchen. They still hear the washing machine vibrating unusually. But instead of thinking, "I should upgrade," they ask themselves, "Will it last another year?" High interest rates make every major decision feel burdensome. Rising living costs have pushed the weekend project to the back burner. And after many years of upheaval, the least mentioned thing is mental exhaustion. They no longer renovate their homes for enjoyment. They are renovating their house to avoid risks. Meanwhile, the pro segment continues to buy. It's not because they're more optimistic, but because they have no choice. The contract has been signed. The project must be completed. Their customers can't wait. This is the point that makes the data misleading. When pro keeps revenue from free-falling, the overall picture looks okay. But beneath the surface, the market's emotional engine has stalled. A healthy market is when people buy because they want to. A tired market is when people only buy out of necessity. And it was that very difference that put Lowe's in an awkward position. They weren't selling to a society eager to build its future. They're selling to a society that's trying to keep everything from collapsing. The most dangerous thing isn't the sharp drop in sales, but rather the prolonged silence of delayed decisions. Do you recognize this in your own home? How many times have you stood in front of an old device and thought, "Not yet"? If those questions sound familiar, you're not alone. And if you want to understand why the cold numbers reflect that very mood, stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because we're gradually peeling back the layers of a weary market in a way that newspaper headlines never fully capture. In the next part, we'll move away from the data tables to look directly at the root of this slowdown, the housing market and the invisible chains holding Americans stuck in their own homes. If I had to choose one place to trace the source of the slowdown at Lowe's, it wouldn't be the checkout counters or the warehouse. That's the housing market. Not noisy, it won't collapse, but like an old house with water seeping in from the foundation, all the problems start from the bottom. The first drag comes from high interest rates, which are considered a red light for any major project. For decades, home renovations in America have often been accompanied by a familiar move: refinancing. The homeowners refinanced at a lower interest rate, took out cash, and turned their old kitchen into a dream project. Now, that road is almost blocked. High interest rates make every financial decision feel like dragging a heavy object through wet sand. No one wants to borrow more just to replace kitchen cabinets or retile the floor. When the cost of capital is already a risk in itself, imagine this. You're standing in an old kitchen, looking at a renovation quote. It's not that you don't want to, but the number behind the interest rate makes you hesitate. When money becomes expensive, dreams are postponed. The second pull comes from golden handcuffs, chains made of low interest rates. It may sound paradoxical, but one of the reasons Americans aren't renovating their homes is because they're too comfortable with their old mortgage. Millions of homeowners are holding on to rare low interest rates from previous years. Selling a house means stepping into a harsher financial world, and so they stayed. But when they don't sell, they don't do a comprehensive refresh either. No major remodel. No overhaul. Do not expand. The house became a place to preserve, not to invest emotions in. The house is still there, but the dream that once lived within it has shrunk. This is a stagnant market, not because of a lack of money, but because of a fear of losing the fragile security they currently have. And then there's the third headwind, which is post-pandemic burnout, a factor not included in the spreadsheet. There's one thing that never appears in financial statements: spiritual energy. After years of upheaval, middle-aged Americans are not just considering money, they're also considering energy. Home renovation used to be a weekend joy. Now, it's a chain of decisions, paperwork, risks, and hassles. And when people are tired, they don't do anything extra. They keep everything just barely running. Do not upgrade, not tested, not nice to have. Those three opposing forces meet at a very specific point. Americans only fix things when they can't live without fixing them. The washing machine is broken. The refrigerator is dead. The heater stopped working just when it got cold. This is a type of shopping that doesn't evoke positive emotions. Not excited, not loyal. It's not easy to forgive. And it's right here that pressure is mounting on retailers like Lowe's. When customers buy out of necessity, they scrutinize more closely. They are more price-sensitive. They are less patient with small mistakes. A bad experience in this context is not just unpleasant. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. What about you? Are you procrastinating on a home renovation project? Not because you don't need it, but because you're waiting for a better time. If the answer is yes, you are part of this picture. And if you find this kind of analysis helpful in understanding what's happening around you, subscribe to the channel, not to see more bad news, but to read the signals hidden behind seemingly emotionless numbers. In the next part, we'll return to Lowe's, but from a different perspective. When the market is tired, what does the company do to survive, and what is the cost? When customers don't return to the store, businesses have two options. One is to wait for the market to recover. Second, create growth by other means. With Lowe's, the answer doesn't lie in hope. In recent reports, there's a detail that's not particularly prominent but appears as regularly as a heartbeat in a tense piece of music: the special costs associated with mergers, acquisitions, and restructuring, which amount to hundreds of millions of dollars. On paper, this is just a line item. But in the language of business, that's a very clear message. Lowe's no longer believes growth will return on its own. Imagine a giant cargo ship slowing down in the middle of the ocean. The main engine is still running, but the traction is no longer sufficient. Instead of waiting for the wind to change, the captain decided to add an auxiliary engine. M&A is the secondary driver. Lowe's isn't buying more stores to sell more hammers or paint. They bought capacity, design, construction, services, and relationships with a professional customer group that still had to spend money. No matter how tired the market was, this is a strategic step, but it is also full of risks, because it acknowledges a difficult truth. The old model is no longer strong enough to pull the future. In a healthy market, growth comes from sentiment. People renovate their homes out of interest, out of expectation, or simply because why not? But in the current context, Lowe's is selling to a market that only buys when necessary. And when natural demand disappears, businesses are forced to buy time. M&A costs, system integration costs, restructuring costs. It's all like pouring more fuel into an already overheated engine. It helps the machine keep running, but it also raises a bigger question. Where are we running to? From a financial perspective, this could be considered proactive, but from a market perspective, it has the feel of a race against exhaustion, because growth that is bought is not the same as growth that is created. A deal might generate immediate revenue, but it doesn't create new excitement among consumers. And that's the paradox Lowe's is facing. They expanded into more specialized services, while the majority of general customers remained stagnant. Ask yourself, do you feel more excited about home improvement than you did a few years ago? Or are you just trying to keep things running for a little longer? If the answer leans toward the latter, then Lowe's actions begin to make more sense. They are not betting on the return of consumer sentiment. They bet on underrepresented segments. But this strategy also comes with an invisible cost. When businesses focus on buying growth, patience for internal issues often decreases. And it was at that point that controversial decisions began to emerge. Decisions not aimed at making customers happier, but at reducing risk, tightening control, and protecting profit margins. In the next part, we'll delve into the most sensitive area of the story, when the pressure to grow turns into policies that make customers feel pushed away, and that's often the moment a brand begins to lose more than it tries to retain. Let's leave Lowe's for a while, because no matter how many financial reports or business strategies we analyze, the real question still lies elsewhere, with you, the very people sitting in front of these screens. Middle-aged Americans today don't think of themselves as getting poorer. They just think they need to be more careful. It's not because the income disappeared. And because everything around us is becoming more unpredictable, the bills are coming more regularly. The provisions of the past are now mandatory. And in that context, the way humans make decisions is changing very subtly. Previously, renovating a house was an emotional project. You look at the old kitchen and imagine a better version of yourself. You're buying a new washing machine not just because the old one is about to break, but because you feel you deserve something better. Now, that thought is becoming rare. It's not because people don't love their homes anymore, but because the spiritual energy to love has been depleted. After years of upheaval, middle-aged Americans are entering stores or opening websites with a different mindset. No longer eager, no longer exploring, but calculating. Can this be postponed? If it breaks, how long can I endure? Is there a cheaper way that's still decent? This is not the psychology of a collapsed consumer. This is the psychology of a weary consumer. And when you start considering each bill, you're no longer buying out of hope, you're buying out of fear. Fearing that the old one will break down at the worst possible moment. Fearing that the repair costs will be even higher later. I'm afraid that if I don't deal with it now, I'll lose control. It is this silent fear that is the true driving force of the current market. It explains why revenue didn't collapse, but also didn't take off. Why do people still buy washing machines, but are no longer interested in remodeling their kitchens? Why is online increasing, but stores are no longer as crowded as before? No one is crying crisis. It's just millions of people choosing the safest option at the same time. And this raises an interesting question for you. Not for Lowe's. Are you delaying a decision just because you don't feel it's the right time right now? Are you choosing a good enough solution instead of the best one, like you did a few years ago? If so, you are not alone. You are reflecting the state of an entire market. If these kinds of analyses make you see yourself in the numbers, subscribe to the channel. It's not about tracking Lowe's, but about understanding the subtle changes happening in modern consumer life. In the next part, we will ask the final and most difficult question. Is this just a temporary downturn, or is it the new normal that both consumers and businesses will be forced to adapt to? And the answer might not be as pleasant as we'd like. After dissecting each layer of data, each business decision, and each consumer mindset, we are forced to confront the biggest and most uncomfortable question. Is what's happening to Lowe's just a cycle of decline? Or is it a sign of a new normal? In American economic history, the home repair market has always been cyclical. When interest rates fall, the housing market revives. Kitchens are demolished and renovated. Bathrooms are upgraded, and hardware stores become crowded again. According to that logic, everything today is just temporary. Interest rates will eventually come down. Suppressed needs will eventually resurface. And Lowe's, along with the entire industry, will breathe a sigh of relief. That's scenario A. That makes sense, easy to accept, and very familiar. But there's another, less discussed scenario. What if the problem isn't just about interest rates? What if Americans had changed the way they looked at their homes? It's no longer a life project, but rather, it's an asset that needs to be kept stable. In this scenario, home renovation doesn't disappear. It's just becoming more selective, more practical. People still replace washing machines when they break down, but they no longer upgrade just because they want to. They still make repairs, but rarely overhaul. This isn't a noisy recession. This is a quiet adjustment, like a family deciding to spend less, but not saying it out loud. And if that's the new normal, then Lowe's story is no longer just about a company. It's the story of an entire generation of aging, more cautious consumers who are less willing to compromise on safety. So, what do you think? Are you waiting for a better time to renovate your house? Or have you silently accepted that enough might be the most reasonable choice for many years to come? And at the end, we'll return to Lowe's one last time, not to judge what they did wrong, but to see if there's a path forward, now that the new normal no longer resembles the past. The story of Lowe's is not just the story of a building materials brand. It's a mirror reflecting how Americans are changing their relationship with their own homes, becoming more cautious, less dreamy, and constantly weighing between should and shouldn't. Perhaps this is just a temporary decline, but it's also possible that we are entering a new normal where consumption is no longer driven by emotion, but by safety. So, what do you think? Do you think the home improvement market will recover soon? Or have consumers truly changed? Are you renovating your home because you want to, or just because you have to? Please leave your perspective in the comments section. Personal stories always help make this picture more complete. If you enjoy analyses where numbers meet people, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next episodes. The video content is compiled from public sources, independent analysis, and personal observations, and is intended for informational purposes and to provide perspectives only. The content does not represent any organization or brand. The figures and assessments are for reference only at the time of their creation. Thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next videos.